We're gonna give it a few minutes because I think there's a few ERB members that we're still waiting on. Patrick and Marnie. Oh no, Marnie's here. Jennifer. Anyways. Patrick, I believe we're waiting on. We'll give him another minute or two.
Good morning, everyone. This is Sal calling in. Nice to meet you all.
Hi, Sal. For everyone to know, Sal is the new interim assistant planning director.
Morning.
Good morning.
Okay, I see Patrick's here. He's connected. So I think we're gonna get started if everybody's good to go. All right, so my name is Courtney McCammon. I would like to call to order the Malibu Environmental Review Board meeting of July 17th, 2024. This meeting is being held by teleconference. Boards and city staff are participating from remote locations. Members of the public can participate in the meeting via Zoom. Members of the public wishing to speak during the meeting must click the raise hand button at the top of the or at the bottom of the screen to indicate a desire to speak after the item has been announced by the chair, and must be present in the teleconference when called upon to be recognized. Once called upon, please lower your hand in the Zoom meeting. Board members, if you have comments to make during this meeting, please raise your hand using the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen, and I will call on you in turn so we can make our discussion clear for the record and for the public. Okay, so we are on written and oral communications from staff and the board. Item number 1. Is there anything for item number 1, Gail? I'm seeing nothing.
Just letting everyone know that Salvador Lopez is joining us as the interim assistant planning director, and he's been here for maybe 2 weeks, and he's doing a pretty great job keeping up with everything. And then also that our next meeting is going to be July 24th, and that agenda should be going out today.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. And we will move on to item number 2, old business. I'm seeing none. Is that still the case?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So we will move on to item number 3, new business, and this is for CDP 22-069, and I will hand it over to Adam.
Thank you, Courtney. Good morning, everybody. So the project before you today is a coastal development permit number 22-069. The project's located at 6511.5 Westward Beach Road. Next slide, please. So here's a look at the project site in relation to the area around it being bounded by Pacific Coast Highway, Westward Beach Road, and Zuma Beach. And I've taken this image from GIS and added a few data layers just to give you some more context of the presence of a blue line stream, ESHA, as well as wetlands right around the area. Next slide, please. So the proposed project is to install a new permanent ungrouted riprap erosion control feature, install a new 24-inch drainage pipe, and associated road shoulder repairs for embankment stabilization. Next slide, please. And here's a look at the site plan with Westward Beach down at the bottom and along the road. And this would be the embankment stabilization. So the purpose for this is that the major rain events that happened directly after the Woolsey fire caused excessive stormwater runoff combined with heavy debris and mud flow. And as I'm sure you know, Zuma Canyon Creek carries a significant amount of water during the rainy season, and the heavy flow of the creek overflowed and caused the embankment slope and shoulder to erode along this section of Westward Beach Road, which undermined the shoulder and the edge of the road and thereby necessitating this project. Next slide, please. And here's just a look at the elevation with the proposed embankment stabilization with Westward Beach on the right and the road shoulder being right there. Next slide, please. So given the project is within ESHA and along the Blue Line Stream, biological resources report was required. And the report identified arroyo willow thicket as the most significant component of vegetation within the survey area, making up most of that area. And the vegetation occurs on slopes and banks lining the stream bed. And in addition, small areas of cattail marsh and a variety of native and non-native grasses were identified in the survey area. But this just gives you a really nice view of the proposed impacted area and the presence of those vegetation. Next slide, please. So native tree protection plan was created as well. And the plan identifies a total of 11 protected trees growing within the survey area. That's 8 western sycamores and 3 California black walnuts. And in addition, 1 dead western sycamore was recorded, and it's recommended that this dead tree be removed prior to the start of project activities. And while the project will likely encroach into the tree's protection zone, all protected trees will be retained in place, and all understory vegetation removals will be performed by hand or by the use of hand tools only. And the ungraded riprap will be placed and embedded around the existing trees, and the alignment of the drainage pipe will be adjusted as needed to avoid the trees. Next slide, please. So given the presence of the Blue Line Stream, as well as the project site's proximity to the Pacific Ocean, we have a few jurisdictional boundaries that are being crossed here. And this map gives you a sense of where those exactly are. So within the project area, we're dealing with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, the Regional Water Quality Control Board, and the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, which all have their own separate permitting processes as it relates to this project. And next slide, please. And that's really it for the presentation. I'm available for questions, and the applicant, which is Julie Santia from the Public Works Department, is available for questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was a wonderful presentation. I did want to give the applicant, Julie, a moment to speak if you'd like. Julie, you don't have to, but wanted to give you an opportunity. Oh, no. Okay. Julie, did you want to say anything, or you could just be available for questions? Okay, we'll have her available for questions. Gail, I'm not seeing anybody from the public in here. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Are there any public comments or anybody from the public in the meeting?
I am not seeing anyone. The person who just joined, Jack Wong, is our interim planning director, and so he came to watch as well.
Okay, perfect.
Hello,
Okay.
everyone.
Hi, Jack. Hi. Okay, well then I think we will open it up to ERB members. Again, you know, Adam is here for questions, and so is Julie from the Public Works Department. So please let us know what questions you have about this project. Is there any ERB members that have thoughts right away, or anybody? Or you guys want me to pick on you? Noah. Okay, great. Thanks, Noah. Let's start the conversation.
Last week, after reading through the project documents, I sent an email over to Gail, with some information about riprap. Gail, did you receive that email, and was that shared with the rest of the board members?
Um, I I thought you wanted me to send it to the applicant so that they could speak about it. And so I did send it to the applicant and the planner.
Okay, and are they going to speak about it?
I can do that. I'm sorry, previously my computer checked out and I couldn't hear or see anything. So I apologize for not answering when you spoke to me earlier. So I went back to the consultant. When I started this project, that was my very same question, was why we were going for hard armoring and not some other alternative. And so at the time, the consultant gave me their answer. It was all verbal. So I asked her to send me an email, and I can read it to you if you'd like. It's a couple of paragraphs, but I will do that now if you don't mind. The original design option included engineered earth armoring system. This option is much more invasive to the existing environment and would have required removal of the planted material, including the trees in the area, and reconstruction of portions of the embankment along the Westward Beach Road. Typically, the environmental agencies do not prefer this option because during extreme storm events, the material can be pulled out of the slope and pushed further downstream, as well as being unnatural as a remediation option. Due to the high velocities of the creek, the riprap solution was established. The velocity of the creek requires 18-inch diameter rock with 36-inch thick mat of riprap. The riprap option was also selected to preserve the tree and root systems that are currently stabilizing the embankment. These rocks can be placed around the existing trees and further stabilize the embankments to provide for future scour protection. Ungrouted riprap was chosen to reduce the environmental concerns and related permanent impacts to the environmental agencies typically do not want to see. This option also allows for planting between the riprap. So yeah, part of the plan on this one is to actually plant between the riprap. And then I'd like to further expand on that, is that in this situation, I read the report that was provided. This is not armoring along a slope where the water is consistent. It's only going to be during severe storm events that water will even hit this embankment and this riprap. So during those high volume storms, there's more scour than usual. And in the opinion of the consultants we hired, this was the best way to armor against the high volume, high velocity storm events. And yeah, that's... Any questions?
Yeah, Noah, you can continue.
Okay, so that makes sense, and I appreciate that the riprap was a softer option than what was originally intended, which was complete armoring. So I do appreciate that. However, the nature of riprap, when water hits it, it actually increases the velocity of that water, which causes additional downstream erosion issues. And there's additional stretch of the stream before we get to the ocean. So the report that I sent, and I don't know if you had a chance to see it, was from FEMA. And it discussed the issues with riprap and what some alternatives are to have a softer bank, less angular. That way, when the water hits it, it prevents scour, but at the same time, it doesn't create the finger on the hose effect and scour out further down portions. And for example, at the Topanga Lagoon, at the Trippet parking lot restoration in Topanga, we have a gully that is basically being eroded. And in that case, we're having a modified riprap installation where there's a layer of riprap going in, but on top of that, there's geotech followed by soil and planting. So that way, when the water hits, it's not directly hitting the riprap and causing those downstream issues. So my recommendation is for the design of this project to explore additional alternatives other than just bare riprap. So basically softer materials, perhaps in conjunction with the riprap, but the riprap shouldn't be what the water hits.
Okay, I do want to point out that the water will only hit it in very high volume storm events. So this will remain dry perhaps for years before there's a storm big enough. Or maybe it's once a year during a big storm where the water hit it, so that scour effect will not be 24/7. Like in a lot of the examples that I read in that FEMA report, those were actually the banks of rivers that are in a constant flow. So the scour is 24/7, whereas this will just be during storm events. And I do hear your suggestion. One thing I want to point out also is that there are trees. We're protecting all the trees along it, so it will have the natural trees on the embankment, and there's going to be plantings in between the ungrouted riprap, and so that also softens it as well. But I think the overall scour issue isn't so much an issue because it's just storm event related and not an active. That's not the wetted perimeter of the river. It's not going to be under constant erosion.
Mhm.
If that helps.
How many extreme storm events have we had in the last 3 years?
Oh, with the thing we did this last winter, there was quite a bit of this went last winter, and then in 2019 I would say were the big events. Yeah.
So with climate change, I think these events are becoming more frequent, and so it's you can't just say that they're not happening that frequently, because as we move forward, it's becoming more and more frequent. Yeah,
I hear you. I wasn't saying that they're happening less frequent. I'm saying it's not at the bank of a river that is in constant flow with the water hitting that embankment. It's not. It's a different. It's a storm related armoring, and not for a riverbank that's full all the time. You know what I mean? If that makes sense. It's not being scoured 24/7
constantly.
Yeah.
How far down does the riprap go into the stream?
It's like 300 feet.
So does it stop before it reaches where the water is normally?
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's a really small. It's just along the slope. It's so much smaller in person when you go look at it than the plans. It's 300 some odd feet in length, and then the width. I'm looking at the plans here. 10, 20. Linearly, it's between 20 and 30 feet. The footprint of it along from the edge of the road to the bottom of the river.
So 20 to 30 feet wide, 300 feet long.
But that's that's at an angle. That's 20 to 30 feet wide.
Okay.
Noah, I have your recommendation written down.
Perfect.
And we can review all the recommendations at the end, but I have it written down.
Thank you.
Do you have any others, Noah?
That's it.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Any other ERB members want to go next? Please raise your hand. Thank you so much. Okay, Patrick.
Yeah, I was just curious why the decision was made to only provide riprap on one side of the embankment and not the other.
That's the side of the road that's the side that's eroding, and that's the road. Our goal is to protect Westward Beach Road, which is owned by the city of Malibu, and the other side is not our property.
Okay, so that's private property. Because it seems like there will be some negative impact to that existing slope, putting the riprap only on one side. It'll just increase the velocities in those high storm events on the other side of the embankment. So there's possible additional scouring and erosion caused by riprap only on one side.
So Julie, it's not possible at all. Is that what you're saying, to riprap the other side, or even really touch the other side because it's not your property?
Well, at this point, it's not part of the project scope,
Right.
And it isn't our jurisdiction.
Okay.
So, when I'm talking to LA Beaches and Harbor, they can. That's their jurisdiction. It's not our jurisdiction to do that. Yeah.
That road that also is next to that embankment is their jurisdiction as well, I'm assuming.
Yeah, we just have Westward Beach Road. And then everything to the west of that or north is LA Beaches and Harbor.
Got it. Sorry, Patrick, I didn't mean to interrupt. Sorry. Was there another
No.
follow-up question that you had?
If it's not your jurisdiction, I really can't say anything more to it, but it was mainly a question of curiosity.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. Clark, I see your hand has been raised. I think you're still muted, Clark. There you are.
It was having trouble unmuting. Good morning, everyone. So the first question I had was answered just now, which is that the goal is to protect the road. And then the intent is to minimize impacts after that primary goal. So my recommendation, because it doesn't sound like it was explored, is to look at cutting the road back during construction and protecting that road edge. When I look at the photographs, and I wasn't able to make it to the site to see for myself, but it appears that the bulk of the erosion is not happening at the toe due to scour. It's actually where the road is draining, the surface flow is draining off and cutting from the top. So my recommendation would be, and I notice in the drawings, there's an asphalt curb called for to deal with that, would be to look at an alternative, admittedly a more costly alternative, that would provide for piers between the stands of woodland, the connected tree canopy, and a deep grade beam at the road level itself, and allow, rather than channelizing the stream further, because even though this is described as riprap on the surface, there's a big toe cut in at the base, right? So it's essentially relying on that piece at the bottom to hold that mat of riprap and boulders in place. I'd like to look at bioengineering combined with protecting the road itself, so the stream can remain naturalized. I recognize that Westward Beach and to some extent the access road on the other side have channelized it, and this is a pinch point no matter what. But ultimately the road, you know, I just look downstream at all the things that could happen when you run extreme flows through this notch. And while I appreciate the attempt to go with the least impact surface treatment, I think putting your protection as far back and maintaining as much natural channel to do what it will, which could include scouring at the bottom, although it looks like those roots are doing pretty well. And my concern would be if you cut that toe in, you're cutting, you know, the roots are established from the bank, from the road towards the stream. The upper roots, there's not going to be a lot holding it back underneath that road anyway. So you're going to be cutting the good root system by digging that toe. And to say nothing of the cattail marsh that's impacted, there's a lot of things that I think could be avoided if you, or at least it's worth exploring, holding the road in the air as opposed to trying to hold the bank. Because again, it looks to me like the bank's failing from the top. It's not failing from the stream side. Yes, it's active channel and it changes every time the stream goes through there, but it's not, I wouldn't call that a failure. It doesn't look like it's digging away at the toe and things are slumping like we have at Topanga Creek right now at the Ranch Motel. It's actually just that over surface runoff that I think the curb's going to do a lot to help if you could underpin that edge of the road. So anyway, that's the idea. Float a structure, you know, between drilled piers and a grade beam system to just minimize those bank and stream channel impacts.
I am writing all that down, Clark. That was a lot, but I think I got it.
I said the same thing a bunch of times, but it's basically
I know, that's, I was like.
hold the road up, not
Got
the
it.
bank in place.
Got it. Got it. Julie, do you have any comments or anything to anything to
I
consider?
do think that, I mean, that's a much more expensive project. That's basically like building a bridge, but the the trees are gonna remain, and we're doing a huge mitigation area to try and soften it as well. And we're gonna keep trees and plants in it. And really, honestly, that what you said earlier, and I probably should have started off that way, is that the goal here is to save the road, in the sense that, and it's an access point for the whole neighborhood above it, and for public access to the beach. And so it's kind of it's a hazard mitigation plan project, which is to prevent a future emergency project, basically. So if we don't successfully do this now and the road fails, likely that will be the response in the future, which usually is, you know, come and armor it up and try and save the road at the last minute. So this is kind of trying to get ahead of that last minute repair and having the road actually fail. And I appreciate, yeah, all we've got the biological reports and everything, and we're retaining the trees, and we're going to do plantings between the ground. We're going to mitigate the other side of the bank. We've looked at a lot of different options, and we can definitely go back and discuss softening, you know, the armoring at this point. But that, just to reiterate, that the main goal really is to preserve the roadway and eliminate the need for a future emergency project. That is actually what the grant is through California.
Right.
Yeah, it's an emergency mitigation project so that we don't have the emergency in the future. Oh, and the last thing I wanted to address was that, yes, the surface water on the street, we're going to have a curb to help prevent that. And also there's a CMP, there's a pipe going that's going to take the surface water off the street to help prevent the future erosion as well. So the surface flow on Westward Beach Road is being addressed as part of this project.
Great. And part of that is a pipe, and that's separate. That's a separate discussion. But again, I thank you for that response. I want to reiterate and don't want to stipulate to the idea that the only way to avoid a future problem is to engineer an existing environmental problem that could be done better. So I'm just going to push back and say, I think the two things that were mentioned first is save the road, and the second one was indirectly save money. And I understand that I'm proposing that the county needs to spend money on this resource. Zuma's had a lot of restoration activity. It's potentially steelhead habitat that's not mentioned. It doesn't have historic, you know, presence absence. It's goby, potential goby habitat. And I just think that this is a place, and at the most critical point, where, while this is purports to be and maybe with NOAA's add-ons the best surface treatment for stabilization, it's not, I would stipulate, it's not the one that is most protective of the roadway, which is the intent and purpose of the project, nor is it the one that allows for the least impacts. So again, I want to acknowledge hearing the discussion about, well, it's emergency to protect problems in the future. The project time, it should be investigated. The pier and grade beam approach should be investigated both from a cost and a time standpoint and compared. So that's a firm recommendation. Understanding everything you said, Julie, is true. It's just more money, a little more time equals a much better project, potentially. So that's all I have.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Clark. I've got that written down. Believe we have a few more ERB members. If you guys have any comments, Marnie, Jennifer, Barbara.
I just have a quick comment. I think it is interesting to figure out how long this solution will last. I thought the comments were good, and I also thought Noah's comments were interesting also, which is also dealing with the time aspect of this, what will happen in the future. But besides that, I think the report was very well done, and protecting the birds and the nesting and the trees, I think is all it was a well-done report. This is not my expertise, so that's the best I can do.
Okay, great. Thank you, Barbara. Really appreciate it. I thought I saw either Marnie or Jennifer put their hand up as well.
It was me, it's Jennifer.
Okay.
So
Okay.
we use that road very frequently to go and rescue marine mammals. And so I'm very familiar with that site, and I'm very happy to see that that all the trees are being salvaged, because of course that's great habitat. The only comment that I have is that I would encourage greater mitigation, a greater area, because during the construction, whether it's Clark's idea or simply the riprap, I think that's very disruptive for the nesting birds. And so I would encourage greater mitigation so that we can provide greater habitat for those animals during construction.
Perfect. Thank you, Jennifer. I'm getting that down. Okay, perfect. And then Marnie, I'm gonna pick on you. Last but not least.
Okay. I think anything that can be done to soften the armoring would be beneficial. And the idea about longevity of these projects that are addressing issues coming up due to climate change is a very interesting one. And I'd like to know a little bit more about that, because if there's a way to do something that is more costly, but is more beneficial environmentally and will provide much greater longevity, that's something that I think government should be looking at.
Okay. Clark, I saw, Marnie, I got that written down. Clark, I saw your hand pop up.
Yeah, so I have a question on process. So in the past, this is not the first time that I've made a recommendation in a public review to do something, essentially akin, in this case, akin to a bridge, and therefore much more costly. Not saying this would happen, but in the other case, it was a private development. The process was to go back and investigate, but the investigation basically was drawn in such a way that it proved, right? It proved the point of the applicant's initial statement, as opposed to, so it was basically designed not in a way that worked. And I would hope in this case, because we're dealing with a public agency, if this investigation were undertaken, anyway, how does that work? Would we ever see it again as a board, or do we just get a report that, hey, we looked at it and didn't work? Like, what would happen? Because again, with the last comment about longevity, that's really what I'm thinking about. If the goal is to hold the road long term for those residents down there, and emergency, not just emergency, just getting in and out to go to work. I do think that side of the impact analysis could be considered, so that if the bank failed completely, the road's still there. And that's basically the secondary goal. Yes, I think it'll be better for the natural, there is a lot of channelization here. I mean, if you look at the slope that's proposed, it's an overfill, so you're pinching again, impacts to the other side. I wouldn't want the response to be, yeah, let's riprap over there too, or harden it. That being said, it's the engineering that goes along with that other alternative and investigation is significant as well. I mean, it's not just, here it is on the back of an envelope. So what happens next? Is there any obligation for the applicant to look at alternatives? And if so, what's the next step?
Adam, do you have any comments on that? Or Julie or Gail? I know that I provide, your written recommendations to the contract planner, and they're written up on formal letterhead. And then beyond that, I'm not, a lot of that is done with the planner.
Well, I'm assuming that Julie could bring these comments to the design consultant just to get their take further on that. But we're also dealing with kind of a unique situation here where this project is grant funded through the governor's office. So in order for us to, if that was feasible, we would have to change the scope of work, likely request more funding from the governor's office. And I'm not sure what that process would be like that Public Works has already gone through. So there's a chance that it could just be rejected because this is not what they originally approved for the grant. But Julie, I'll kind of leave it.
Or the funding sunsets or something. Believe me, I'm familiar with that. We don't do anything without grant funding. Generally, the state, and I have to say, county's been a great partner for us, but not generally a funding partner. So yes, it may cost money to protect this particular city of Malibu area resource at the county or state level. And yeah, I understand. Oftentimes scope can be changed, but I have a feeling what's going to happen now, if I just had to anticipate, because again, we're not going to meet again for a while based on prior grants, is A, yes, you could extend it, but B, there's no more money, right? The grant is fixed for a certain amount of analysis, so that's liable to be a problem. So I think I understand that it's likely to be that the county would incur costs just to even look at this, let alone to seek funding for the actual, the actual construction. And believe me, I understand the game here. I mean, that's how we value ourselves as a not-for-profit agency, is we show how much of other people's money we've gotten to spend here on natural resource enhancement. So yeah, it's good to have those state funds, but again, this is, thank you for bringing these things up, because this is exactly why typically when these recommendations are made is, well, we didn't have the money, or we didn't have the time, or so that's pertinent to my process question. So it's up to the applicant to determine whether or not any recommendation to explore anything further is feasible or not, is what I'm not sure that's what I'm getting. I just know that it's going to be more costly and take more time and require, adjustments in line items and grant deadlines. It just will, if you explore this. So what happens if and when, because it's more likely when that is the case.
Okay, as far as timelines in this project and reevaluating, we already have the permits and the grant funds, and any change to it would, I would say, would cancel the project at this point, and would have to be imagined, redesigned. And so if the project, there's not room within the grant funding timeline and the permits to do a redo at this point, honestly. If you decided like to do no project and reimagine it and redo it, it'll take several years. In the meantime, there could be a failure that ends up being an emergency project. That's what I'm worried about, which will take out probably more trees and not have all the mitigation and all the lovely things we've added to this. I think there could be an opportunity to look at it more long-term, like you're speaking, and then create a project that's more long-term, that could even remove the armory or redo it, or like you were saying, create a more engineered solution to the road where it's more standalone. It's not relying on the embankment of the river, or there's so many possibilities. It's true in the long-term solution. Besides that, this grant and the goal of this project was to mitigate a future emergency project. That is 100% the goal of this project right now before us, and that's how we approached it. And trying to do it in the most environmental, friendly way with the trees and the mitigations. I mean, the saving all the trees along the embankment, and the mitigation, which will include removing invasive species at a 2-to-1 ratio of the area of the project. And I was just reading the part, it says it's going to allow native plants to be, I would like to introduce more native plants, add that to the scope of the mitigation. Instead of just allowing native plants to flourish, let's add some.
They don't. Weeds flourish.
Yeah.
change the slope, as you
Yeah,
know, so.
the
yeah.
mitigation does include a twice-a-year effort to go out there and work on the native plantings, what's going on out there, removing invasive species and monitoring for 5 years. But as it is, I think that the reimagining and trying to change the whole scope of the project, honestly, I think it would cancel this effort.
Julie, thanks for your honesty. That's what I was,
Okay.
you took the hook, you swallowed it. Because I just wanted to hear that in the record, because that's what happens.
Yeah, it would
Exactly
cancel
what
this
you just
project.
described is, you know, I'm sorry, but it's like, it's a version of the argument that I like to say is like, babies will die if we don't do it now. And I'm sorry, I'm being a little extreme, but thank you, because this is what happens when we get to the point where we're seeing if the alternatives have not been explored fully, then at the environmental review level, this is the problem. They say, well, we can't now because the grant that we wrote to explore alternatives didn't explore that alternative. That may just be the truth of it, but there it is. I then would like to suggest that, first of all, 2-to-1, okay. Yes, but the coastal, I don't know what the coastal requirements are for mitigation just offhand, based on the Malibu plan as opposed to LA County's. Well, sorry, LA County was absorbed, right? So, but I think those trees are lost. I think when I see that toe cut in, I do not believe those trees are going to survive. At least for me, there's a high likelihood that will kill the trees. You cut their downslope roots that are trending in that direction for the water and subsurface water that's there. That's all within the impact zone of those trees in the root system. I think long term, you're looking at a riprap slope without that deep root. You may have your new things coming in, right? If you plant, please do add, multi root level restoration going forward. But, if we were looking at somebody extending a deck into the drip line of trees, just say the creek was a deck instead of coming from above, you would have recommendations for careful investigation and piers and grade beads at that level. So at the toe of slope, you wouldn't have a continuous trench at the critical drip line zone. So anyway,
So Clark, just along those lines, so they are required to monitor these trees for 10 years because of the encroachment, and should any of the health of the trees worsen and decline to the point of them dying, they will replace them. Sorry, I don't know if that's where you're going with it. It seemed like it.
well, yeah, thank you for highlighting that. I would just say
Yeah.
when they do decline, I'm not sure they'll die, or it takes a long time for an old walnut or a sycamore to actually die. But anyway, that's I don't want to take everyone else's time here. But again, the recommendation stands as investigate a third alternative. Sounds like 2 were looked at. I don't know how much analysis was done, and look for opportunities to fund it outside of the existing grant, if that's not possible. And my recommendation would be not to cancel the project, because that's the no project alternative, but to add a third, not to say, well, we're not going to add a third, so it's therefore no project. And the project, so the applicant would be canceling the project. The project wouldn't get canceled. It would be the applicant's decision to evaluate and say no project is the only feasible alternative. I think that would damage the road, but I'm not sure it'd be worse for the creek. So anyway, that's where I am on this.
Okay, thank you, Clark. I have that recommendation written down. So hopefully, Adam, we can, I'll give those notes to you. I saw
On
noise-
the sorry,
Oh.
on the process side that we were just speaking about, everything that's spoken about at ERB needs to be addressed in the staff report. And in the bad faith example you gave, in which someone said it's not possible and they came up with the idea, I don't know anything about that, but The planning commission looks at all of these reports, and it's up to them to decide if it needs to go back to ERB, it needs to be worked. And
Just want to say, I never said bad faith. I
yeah,
just said
sorry, put words in
the
your
way
mouth.
the way of the world. I mean,
I got you.
this is like how it goes. And I understand the engineer's point of view. It's not bad faith. It's a standard of practice
Mhm.
that I'm concerned about in these situations. We see it late, the money spent, that alternative was taken off the table immediately. And now we got this problem where it's like, we weren't at the table early on to say, well, wait a minute, why are you taking that off? Let's at least show people. Believe me, we're dealing with this. We had to look at things that we had no intention of doing, and some very expensive things down the road in Topanga. Because you have to show if someone, you have to show that it didn't work in analysis sometimes, even though everyone around the table with all their expertise knows that it's not going to be it's typically it's not affordable or feasible in the time frame. So I understand all that. I'm not saying it's bad faith. I'm just saying I'm not convinced that it wouldn't be worth looking at.
Perfect.
Thank you, Gail. I saw Noah's hand, I think, first. Not sure.
Yeah. So I wanted to kind of continue off of a couple of points that Clark made. The first one regarding the trench at the toe of the slope. Are there alternatives to excavating a trench at the toe of the slope to hold up the riprap? Or is there an alternative means available to hold that riprap in place? Perhaps by, pounding something in at the toe of the slope, for example, to avoid the potential damage from that excavation.
I'm unmuted. Okay, hi. Sorry about that. I mean, I could definitely take that back to the consultant and ask. And for what it's worth, that was my very first question when I got this project as well. It was already awarded to a consultant, and it was to ask about the riprap and not having such a hardened, hard armored approach. So part of that's the prescribed design by the consultants, and this is the work that they do. I can bring it back to them and see if there's an alternative as well, for what it's worth. Yeah.
So I'll
Yeah.
recommend I'll recommend looking at alternatives to putting in a trench with an alternative mechanism for holding up the riprap. In addition to softening the riprap as well. And then on the other note that Clark made, we don't really, as the board, we don't know what happens with these projects once they leave the board. It would be helpful to us to once the project is fully approved and permitted, to have some sort of feedback saying, okay, what recommendations were incorporated, which ones weren't, and why. And that would help us to formulate our recommendations for future projects.
Okay, I can think of how best to keep you up to date on that, if it's just as an interested party, or how best to keep you up to date on when the report goes out and the planning commission meeting it goes to. I can get back to you on that.
Thank you.
Patrick, go for it.
So I'm just looking through the files here, and I want to better understand something with there's been no geotechnical investigation done for this property, right?
I do not have a geotechnical report associated with this project.
Because with the primary goal being to stabilize the road, it's tough for me to say at this point if this accomplishes the goal. So I think the only recommendation I would really have at this time is not to do a full-blown geotechnical report and review from the city's geotechnical review, but something to actually show that this accomplishes the goal of stabilizing the road. And looking at the construction details too, it looks like they're just doing standard Caltrans curb and AC pavement and whatnot. And I'm wondering if there's maybe a solution that doesn't involve piles and grade beams, which obviously increases cost and everything else. But if there's some solution with either a deepened curb along that edge to provide some additional daylight to that slope, especially in the event that it fails. And then possibly what I've seen before on private projects is an increased depth to the base layer below the AC to provide a similar goal as the deepened curb that I mentioned, but just something to provide additional support on that road if that's the primary goal, to save the road with all this. And again, difficult for me to say without any geotechnical review, and it may be truthfully difficult for the consultant to say too, because I know nothing about the subsurface soils conditions at this point to know, what's going on there. And if this, especially with the, I think it's like a 5.5 foot deep trench that they're proposing along that edge, if that actually gets into competent material, if it's bedrock, if it's a potential landslide material, it's tough for me to say at this point. But if there is the funds available to do some high level geotechnical investigation of this to know if this in any sense accomplishes the goal, would be the only thing I would say.
Perfect. Thank you, Patrick. Yeah, I have that written down. Julie, I'm sorry, I didn't mean, if you had something to say, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I don't really have much to say to tell you the truth. We have licensed engineers who do this work, who designed it, and I would have to defer to their expertise on the roadway design. It does include a shoulder repair, and they have the new curb, as you mentioned, which are all standard roadway construction. And I can't really speak further to the actual geotech part because that's not my expertise. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and just to clarify, I'm not saying the plans are under-designed or anything like that. I'm just wondering, with this stuff mentioned about doing a grade beam and piles for road support, I imagine it's tough for them to say at this point too, without knowing anything about the underlying soil conditions, if, what's going on here, and if potentially there's a landslide and all this is just going to slop out anyway, to use it a loose term, but at, just some high level geotechnical review may be warranted.
Okay.
Yeah, perfect, Patrick. I have that written down. And then Clark, I saw your hand raised.
Yeah, I won't go off camera. You know what I look like now. But that's exactly, we're having a design workshop right now. Thanks, Patrick. I just want to come back and say, okay, that's the example of a build on the idea, which is that, okay, if it's eroding from the top, if it's sort of an emergency approach, right? It doesn't have full geotechnical, this wasn't planned. It's because you're seeing impacts that you want to get ahead of. So I like Patrick's idea of like, what's the least amount what we can do at the road, and possibly phase construction so that if a deepened curb, because it does show build in 3-inch lifts. I don't know if they're talking about the curb or down, but the reason there's no thickened curb into the embankment is because the chosen approach is the riprap. So it's doing that, right? So Patrick's idea is a design build on it's a fallback. And what I like about it is that, yeah, I said piers and grade beams just to be extreme, because I could hear if I said, well, why don't you just thicken the curb, like Patrick, who's actually a qualified civil engineer, can say, it probably would have said, well, we're probably going to need piers and grade beams. So I jumped to the most extreme for a long term. But if this is, it's not the right term, but it almost feels like it's a rapid response, not an emergency response, to prevent an emergency response. So if we're going to do that, I like Patrick's idea of working on the road edge, because I think engineers designed to parameters, right? And they're thinking, oh, I've got to stabilize this bank. But again, these are a bunch of ifs, and recognize that I recognize that I don't know all of it, but the photographs clearly show to me that the erosion's because of draining over the top in high flows, not because of the toe flow of the creek itself. So anyway, I'm just reinforcing Patrick's suggestion to look at road edge detailing that could enhance that before you cut the toe in, which I think Noah was suggesting could also be done in a more periodic way, right? Sort of like some kind of pier plus grade beam at the toe as opposed to at the top. So anyway, that's I know everyone loves to have design interaction at the level at this point in time, not. But yeah, I think that, I mean, what about that idea? I guess that's a question, Julie. Do you think that your permit would allow for phasing to say, let's just see if we can fix the road itself and that drainage problem, then see what happens and come back with the second part of your design, whatever that might be, riprap at that point.
Yeah, like the permit right now, as it stands, includes all three elements, which is the shoulder repair. This project was originally titled shoulder repair, and that was our focus. So I changed it to embankment, and now maybe I regret it. So it was a shoulder repair, and we are rebuilding the shoulder along the entire length of the project by 3 feet. They're going to remove it and reinforce it and put in a curb that will guide the flow, for lack of a better word, along that curb line and then into that CMP pipe, which will take the water off the road, which will mitigate, perhaps not solve, the erosion problem at the on the roadway. And then the riprap is, it's a hard armoring engineering approach to this hazard mitigation, which is, that's the focus. This project is supposed to be a hazard mitigation rather than an improvement project. And I feel like a lot of this discussion is about how we can improve the roadway, and it's a different focus. And I totally appreciate that. I'm wondering, of course, I'm in the position right now is we have a project that's designed, it's already got the permits, and we're ready to go. I don't know about exploring a part 2 to the project that's after this project that is more long-term solution that looks at all these great alternatives post-project, and what that means once the armoring is put in there. I know this from an engineering standpoint, and I've heard it for years because I've actually been pretty anti-armoring in my own career, to tell you the truth, of beaches and whatnot. And once it does get put in, it is, I'm not sure I have even one example of them ever removing it. And
we're about to have one, I hope, at Topanga Lagoon, where that was done, emergency on the west bank. But I'm not, and I don't think Patrick was either, suggesting a second phase in addition to this project, is instead of, because you've got the permits, right? So you've got the permit for the full impact, including killing the trees, right? So you can always do less within the permit. So the permit's not the issue. The issue would be, could we spend less money? Again, this is Patrick's build as I'm visualizing it. Look at the road and, maybe road plus the drainage, right? So the pipes part of it, you've already got those impacts covered. You're just impacting less to see if it's enough. Again, subject to things we don't know, like the geology or the nature of the road bed, how stable it is, underneath there. But that's the idea, is that start with the road and the curb and a change in that detail to not install the riprap, knowing you have the permit to do so later. I know permits don't last forever, right? It's a period of impact, but that I think is.
It's important to separate the issues of the permit and the grant funding. So it's true, the permit is going to outlast the funding. So if we wanted to build in 3 alternatives, the alternative being the design as it is, and that we're ready to go forward, the no project alternative, and then the alternative of the roadway repairs minus the riprap. I can see that.
It sounds like Patrick's idea would spend less money and impact less. So it would be within the budget and within the bounds of the permit. It would just be a smaller project, which, arguably increases, I'm doing air quotes here, the risk of bank loss because you did less now than you're permitted to do, but could allow for a retained natural stream bed where there is established habitat and a lot of it that's going to be impacted by being buried by riprap, to say nothing of the toe cutting of that root mass. So anyway, it's a smaller project alternative. So I just wanted to reiterate that sounds worth exploring to me.
Perfect. Thank you, Clark. Thank you, Julie, for all your answers to all these questions. Okay, wonderful. If there are no other ERB comments at this time, I just want to double check. No other ERB comments at this time. Okay, perfect. Again, Julie, thank you so much for answering all the questions. Adam, for your presentation. Gail, thanks so much for putting this together. And Gail, everybody, or we will be having another ERB meeting on July 24th, next Wednesday at 9 a.m. And we're bringing 2 projects to the ERB members. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Courtney.
Thanks so much.
You.
Good Wednesday.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.